shadow of death, in the embrace of Messmer's flame.
And that line right there is without a doubt the line that I've heard the most in Elden Ring so far. Be sure to stick around to the end of this video to see my encounter with Messmer the Impaler. Welcome to part 2 of my Shadow of the Erdtree Elden Ring DLC playthrough. If you have not checked out part 1 yet,
what are you doing?
I will link it in the description, or you can click the card right up above. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel,
What are you doing?
please do so, as it helps me out a lot and you won't miss another video. Just to recap, so far we have defeated R'hllana, defeated the Dancing Lion, and we've located an area of the map that is sealed off by Shadow. Looking ahead to part 2 here, we have more boss fights, more dungeons, new regions to discover, and more death. So without further ado, here we go. We start by heading towards the Morth Ruins, which actually happens to end up being a crazy rune farming spot with all of these NPCs that you can just ride by on Torrent and slash them once. But I found a Mikola Cross, a Site of Grace, and this guy right here, who doesn't say much, but I found a message on the ground that said try gesturing. Clearly there was a particular gesture I had to use, ironically called May the Best Win, because next thing you know I'm transported into a fighting arena where this guy's trying to throw hands. Fighting and defeating the Dryleaf Dane actually ends up giving you some bracers where you can equip as basically just fists to use against enemies, where you can just run up to them, level them up, and punch them. I didn't end up using these during my playthrough, but definitely one of the more interesting experiences here, picking a fight on the street, I guess, with an NPC. But as you continue through the ruins, you can see the rune farming spot that I kind of alluded to earlier. I mean, I started with 5,000 runes, and honestly, within like 20 or 30 seconds, I finished with over 20,000 runes. So I would actually come back here a couple of times if I was pretty close to leveling up, and I didn't want to risk losing all of my runes like I've done in the past. Some of these guys are tough though. I mean, they didn't all want to be a part of my rune farming scheme. This guy actually reminded me a lot of when SpongeBob and Patrick wouldn't stop making fun of Texas. The cool part about the Morth Ruins, which I didn't even realize, you can find a underground tunnel which leads you through like an old abandoned city with all of these ruins, but it actually leads you to the next part of the map, which is the Bonnie Village. There's really nothing too crazy going on down here. I feel like this area really just serves as that tunnel to the Bonnie Village. There's a like a buff, an incantation, a couple items that I don't even know what they do. They just kind of lie in my inventory. If I scroll through my inventory, I mean, I've played this game for over 130 hours now at this point. More than 60 or 70% of the items in my inventory, I have, 1, no idea how they got there, 2, what they do, and obviously I never ended up using them. Like, it's crazy to me how often I find myself seeing items in this game where I know some people out there are incorporating them into their builds, but just some of the layers and how deep you can personalize your build in this game, it's really fascinating to me. Once we finally get to the Bonnie Village, it's a cool little town. There's a lot of NPC enemies, no major bosses here in this area, and the whole area has a couple of different bridges. One actually connects you to the right side of the map. So, not too much going on inside of the town itself. There's actually this red invasion NPC that for some reason really kept scaring me because of how aggressive he was, and I killed him one time. I ended up going back to the Bonnie Village, and he respawns. It's not like one of those fights where you kill him once and he doesn't show up again. So that one caught me by surprise, but overall at the Bonnie Village, this really isn't a significant part of the map in my opinion. And moving through the Bonnie Village, I found what is appearing to be a frozen cave. I know I've already said it a couple times how much I enjoy the caves and the dungeons in this game, whether it is for the loot, plenty of jump scares in this one, group attacks, like some of it sucks, but it's actually a lot of fun seeing how much detail goes into these. This frozen cave actually gives us our first boss fight here in my part 2 playthrough, and looking back at the clips, to be completely honest, I don't even remember facing this guy. I guess I must have killed him on the first try. I mean, we get an ash, a spirit ash that I don't think, again, I ended up using, but the Curse Blade Labyrinth, if he was good for anything, I mean, I'll take the 100,000 runes for sure. After we get through the frozen cave, looking at my map, I see a building that, at least to me, looks pretty significant for the DLC here. As I start to head up the road, I believe for the first time, the Elden Ring world begins to talk to me, saying something about how a great rune has broken, and so has a powerful charm. So it doesn't seem like the road ahead is going to be too easy. And guess what? It's a furnace golem. I've decided at this point that these creatures are just not worth my time. I run away from them now. I have yet to defeat one. I've seen all sorts of articles and videos how you just hit them until they fall and you throw a pot into their little gully. It doesn't work for me, so I'll be okay without defeating a furnace golem. You know, maybe I'll come back to one towards the end of my playthrough here, but yeah, I don't have much else to say about this guy except for the fact that he sucks. The building that I was looking at on the map ends up being this really cool looking church right here, kind of standing alone on its own. There is a NPC inside the church that you can speak to. He provides us with a ruins map, which upon first glance I couldn't recognize any of the symbols on it, and it looks like you can also buy spells from him, which I'm not a wizard, doesn't really help me, but I'm sure somebody will be looking for him. At this point, I did start to bounce around the map a little bit just because I wasn't sure quite what to do with that ruins map that I got from the church. So I made my way up to the, I guess, northwest side of the map just to discover some of the map, and this led me to the raw ruins. This was pretty cool, kind of similar to the Morth ruins, but maybe a little bit more puzzle-like. Cool place to discover. Get some runes. Those same NPC enemies are here, and at least to what I thought, there was no boss for this area. If you haven't noticed, I do enjoy looking at all the soapstone messages on the ground. Elden Ring being my first Souls game, I actually thought this was a pretty cool touch to the game with the online play, and this sequence definitely gave me a little bit of a chuckle, we'll say. The worst part is that it wasn't even a strong foe ahead. Yes, he is, but not a big boss fight like I was expecting. You know, I love my boss fights. I love dying over and over again. Where at least if I die to a boss, it's justified, and not to a dude with a big sword like this because I don't know how to parry. And still without really too much direction here in part 2 of my playthrough, I've kind of run into a couple of dead ends so far, so I decided to finally head up the road to what looks like to be a main part of the DLC. Ends up being named as the Shadow Keep. Right off the bat, upon arrival to the Shadow Keep, this huge dark castle, and a big elevator ride, you know that this is going to be a pretty significant area in the map. And right away, once we get into the Shadow Keep, we come across another major boss here in the DLC. The Golden Hippopotamus looks more like a rabid porcupine. Definitely an interesting boss design. I like it though, but just so angry. The fight itself took me a couple of tries, and honestly, each attempt takes anywhere from 2 to 3 minutes because he is a tankier enemy with a couple of different attacks. You'll see one where he expands his porcupine spikes and does like a 360 throwing them across the arena. Or there's my personal favorite, when he opens up his mouth, sprints at you faster than you can run away from him, and grabs you and starts giving you whiplash in his jaw. That one's pretty good. Either way, defeating the golden hippopotamus actually opens up the rest of the Shadowkeep area, as well as grants you, I think it's an incantation, with one of his attacks. Navigating through the Shadowkeep area can honestly be pretty difficult at times, just because of the verticality of the area. You open the map, you see all these sites of grace kind of on top of each other, and that's because of the multiple layers of vertical levels that are at the Shadowkeep. And that's without mentioning the fact that the enemies here are actually pretty tough. They hit hard, and there's a lot on each level. From that center grace after defeating the Golden Hippo, there's a couple of different ways that the Shadowkeep actually branches out. One of them brings you into this back room that's basically like a library, while a lot of the other sections of the Shadowkeep have like this outside staircase section, kind of similar to the Stormvale Castle, where you can ascend that way. Or there's even like a basement that you can go to get access to like this backyard almost outside. That actually is a pretty good place to farm some of the furnace golems. And before I decided which way I wanted to continue to ascend the Shadowkeep region, I know I said I bounced around a bit during this playthrough. Well, this is one of those instances because I fast traveled out of the area and discovered the Darklight Catacombs. This area, honestly, one of the more difficult catacomb tomb parts of not only the game but the DLC, and it led to one of the more interesting and unique boss fights, I think, in the DLC so far at this point. Once you get through to the bottom of the catacombs, the boss here is going to be Jory, the Elder Inquisitor, and the reason why I say it's one of the more unique fights is because, as you can see, the Elder Inquisitor has a lot of ranged attacks, a lot of spells that she casts, and almost like these little minions that don't really leave her side, kind of like the start of the boss fight with Commander Nile. This one's pretty different, as opposed to just facing a boss one-on-one, obviously, so it took me a couple of tries to get used to it, but the arena actually helps you out a bunch. Some of these, like, rune architects, you can hide behind the tombstones, so it wasn't too difficult, but the boss fight itself is definitely unique. And after that fight, before heading back to the Shadowkeep, located the second to last part of the map here in this extremely dark and looks like a haunted forest for the Abyss area of the map. But as promised, we finally make our way back to the Shadowkeep, and you can see what I was talking about when I said that the area is kind of like a grand library. Similar to the Morth Ruins, you get these NPCs that give you a bunch of runes, which I definitely appreciate, but this is where you actually see some of those tougher enemies in the Shadowkeep on each level. And as you can see, you continue to climb. It's not necessarily always going to be a staircase that you have to go up. Sometimes you cut across the middle with these statues that are fixed for you. And I actually found another one of Miquella's crosses here in the Shadowkeep. Thankfully, as you continue to climb the keep, plenty of grace points for you to save your progress, as well as deposit some runes into levels, as well as rewards and fragments to upgrade your character. But it's pretty much at this point, once my playthrough for the DLC starts to get a little bit real. Insert Messmer the Impaler, who I later realized was actually the cover athlete for the Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree DLC. And this boss quickly became the most difficult boss for me throughout both the base game and my DLC playthrough here. Prior to this, it was probably Malekith, where I had to go out of my way, actually rebuild my whole character, and get special items to make that fight a little bit easier for me. And without a doubt, after a couple of tries, I had realized that Messmer was going to be a problem. And it did not take me long to realize why they called Messmer the Impaler, due to one of his signature moves that basically one-shots you if he's able to catch you with it. Grabs you, throws you in the air, and sends his spear through your body, which, good for him, but this was only the beginning for me and my attempts at defeating Messmer. This boss fight honestly took me a good 3 hours with a couple of different breaks that I took, and thankfully I did. But the surprise to me was that I didn't even realize there was a phase 2 to this fight until probably 30 or 40 minutes into my attempts. So that was a grand old surprise for me. Just staying on topic with phase 1 real quick, I already mentioned the Impaler move that he has, but he's fast, he's aggressive, and he has a lot of range. He almost does like a Melania waterfowl, except it's in the air and he has fire on his sword. So honestly, I thought this one was a little bit more difficult to dodge than Melania's waterfowl dance, because even after defeating him, this is probably the one move he has where I still didn't realize how to dodge it. Once I finally was able to get to phase 2, Messmer the Impaler turns into Base Serpent Messmer, and the snake that's on his back during the initial part of the fight actually is used as one of his weapons here in phase 2, which isn't too hard. It's just more so for this fight another layer, dodging the snake heads when they try and bite you. And I already mentioned this fight took 3 hours. Obviously I died a lot to Messmer, and this was one of those that was annoying to me because at some point when I finally started to learn his moves, I'm confident that I could win the fight because I was getting close. And I was almost at my breaking point because one attempt I died, and my trusty little Mimic Tear actually defeated Messmer after I had already died. So imagine being that close. At this point I'm already 2 hours in, and I just watched the fight actually get completed. Of course I don't get credit for it. But I will add that I did not want to defeat Messmer that way because at this point I have a respect for Messmer. So my girlfriend actually kept looking at me every time I lost because I was supposed to be making our hamburgers for dinner. So took a nice little break, got a full stomach, made the burgers, and I encouraged her to watch my next attempt because I knew it was going to be an important one after taking a break and regaining my patience. So for everyone's viewing pleasure, here is my final attempt at Messmer the Impaler, after we ate our hamburgers.
Narca, a curse upon thee.
If you consume Elden Ring or any Souls content like I do now at this point as a player, you've probably seen a meme, at least for me, I see it on Instagram, where it's like, oh my god, this boss sucks, stupid mechanics, not a fair fight. You finally defeat him, and then it's like, oh my god, this is the best boss ever. Well, for me, I will forever associate that meme with Messmer the Impaler, because honestly, after defeating him, he's my favorite boss in the game, between the Elden Ring base game and the DLC. On top of that fight being absolutely phenomenal, looking at one of the items that Messmer dropped is Messmer's Kindling, which is described to burn the ceiling tree. And if you remember from the first part of my playthrough, it seems like I know exactly what to do with it. We head back to Belurat, the tower settlement, to unlock the sealed tree with our newly found Messmer's Kindling, and it appears we still do not have the right. So I wasn't sure if I had to use the item in a different spot, or if there's a different ceiling tree, but I thought for sure this is what I was supposed to do, but clearly it was time for me to continue looking throughout the map. But that is going to wrap up part 2 of my Shadow of the Erdtree playthrough here. Of course, if you did like the video, leave a comment below and subscribe to the channel so you do not miss part 3 when it comes out. We'll see you next time.